Hey everyone, so we are just getting ready to do probably the most expensive casting that we've ever done before. This is a 1985 OG Air Jordan 1 Chicago. And for those of you who don't know, a pair of these shoes is worth about $50,000. What I have done for this shoe to prep it really isn't a lot. All I did is I actually super glued the tongue right here and right here, just so it sits flush to the front and you can actually see that Nike Air symbol there. Before I did that, the tongue was kind of falling back, so I just super glued that in place. And then this is our mold that we have prepared for this. So we've got it wrapped in plastic on the outside, and that's because it's gonna get placed in this chilling tank behind me here. So this tank is actually filled with water and then runs through our chiller. So that's what's going to prevent this piece from overheating as we do the pour. So we've already got a solid black base layer in there. I'm going to place the shoe in, and then we're just going to pour about 2 or 3 millimeters, and that's just to secure the shoe in place and stop it from floating. And then once that layer is cured, we'll do our final casting. Okay, so now I'm literally just going to take the shoe and place it in there. Since this resin in the bottom there is still wet, you know, it's not critical that I get it centered on my first try. So I can just kind of play with this a bit until I get it looking center, and we'll allow this to sit in here. It'll probably be about 3 or 4 days, and then we'll come back and pour that last layer. Alright, so we did our base layer for the shoe, and the shoe is in there. You guys can see it down there. Unfortunately, the way we have to set up our molds to do these big castings now, it's not very easy to see the actual pour happening, but it is going to look cool, trust us, especially when it's done. And what this whole setup is here is we've got chilled water that circulates through a chiller, and like this water is very chilly right now. I don't know the exact temperature, but that's what stops everything from overheating, because before we were putting these in the fridge, which did work, but we find the water cooling works even better. So we've got our resin mixed up here, and I'm going to pour it in. So it has been, I think, like 5 or 6 days. We've left this in here for a little while. Just because when you do cool your pours, it's going to take longer for them to set up and cure. The water here is about 4 degrees Celsius, and the casting is about 12, 13 degrees Celsius. So that actually tells us that there is still some heat being generated by this, but it's enough so at this point that we feel comfortable pulling it out. Because yesterday the water was at 4, and the casting was still almost at like 20 degrees. So it has started to come down quite a bit. And this is also going to kind of be the moment of truth to see if we got any bubbles or there was any of the ink from the shoe that bled out. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. Oh guys, this is hard. Okay. Whew. That was awful. Take a look, everyone. So far, so good, actually. We've got some bubbles on the top right here and here, and those are only on the top. They don't go really that far down at all, so we're good there. And then we had a leak, actually. Look at that. We had some water get into our pour. We're really lucky that that wasn't any worse. All 4 corners had a little bit of a bubble that I think there's some water inside of. We have enough room though to cut that off. We built our mold enough oversize. The important part that we were really worried about was actually the laces in our previous test bled out black, but they didn't on this one. So this actually went, all in all, very, very well. Oh, nice, the screw's rusted. So it's very soft here, so that's why it was so hard to come off. So we'll definitely be leaving this. But you guys can see the clarity that we've gotten there now. The shoe's looking very, very clear, and it should polish up quite nicely. After demolding, we're taking the shoe to the jointer and we're starting off by just surfacing the bottom face, just so we have a flat reference surface to go off in the planer. Then after jointing the bottom face, we go to our Laguna planer and we're just trying to plane it so it's clean on the top, and there's also a couple bubbles that got trapped at the top that we're going to try and plane out as well. We did leave lots of room above the shoe, like we poured extra resin, so we've got room to plane this down. So Lechik and I are just measuring to make sure we've got enough room and we're not going to hit anything. And then after we've got those two faces cleaned up, we're going to flip the casting on its side, go back to the jointer, and joint another edge. But before that, we kind of have to determine if it's safe. Yes, and then if you look at this side, Lechik, we don't want to touch the lace.
Oh my God.
Okay. So we have to take like the minimum. Okay.
This one is almost straight. See if you look at it.
Yeah, it is pretty straight. So then should we just take the minimum off this side?
Maybe you should take a minimum.
And put this against the fence?
Yes.
So the issue here that you heard me and Lechik talking about is the shoelace on the right-hand side is super close to the edge of our casting, and there's actually some silicone at the bottom of the casting on the right side that we need to get out. That's what I'm pointing to there right now. So it's a very fine line of jointing enough so that we get rid of that silicone and not jointing too much so we hit the lace. But we did pull it off because we have Super Lechik, and he did it. He made sure we didn't hit it. And now we're going over to the panel saw and we're actually cutting the casting to size. So our panel saw isn't quite large enough to make this in a single cut, so we have to cut one side and then rotate the piece and cut off the other side. It does leave a small lip, like it's not 100% perfect when we do it this way. So then I just like to start with a pretty low grit sandpaper to clean everything up. After the initial 120 grit sanding, I'm using just a 45-degree bevel bit to put a nice chamfer on this piece. Also, the reason I'm putting a chamfer is there was a couple bubbles towards the outside corners that the big chamfer is going to help to hide and get rid of. So you know, it looks good, but it's also a little bit of a trick. If you guys have any imperfections, just use a bigger bevel. It is very messy. That's one thing I will say when you're routing epoxy like this. And also be sure to go in multiple steps. I think I did this bevel in like 5 steps just because I didn't want to chip or get any big chunks coming out of the epoxy. So that's what I'm doing here. And then once the bevel's done, it's sanding from 120 grit by hand on the bevel, so that's a lot of sanding, all the way up to 4,000 grit, and then using polishing compounds to go the rest of the way to take us to the point where we're ready to put our ceramic coating on.
Do you want to apologize for it?
Yes. You guys are probably hearing some whining in the background. That is Charlie. We'll cut to the camera now. A couple weeks ago, Charlie found a stick on a walk that that he is obsessed with. He cannot get enough of this stick. I think he thinks it's a bone, but the problem is he keeps tearing chunks off and like trying to eat them, so he can only have it for short amounts at a time. But this is one of those times. Oh! Okay, and if you're doing one of these castings, the final and one of the most important steps is protecting it. So we always use our Black Forest ceramics. Today I'm using the base coat. And if you weren't to do this, you're leaving your casting susceptible to scratches, and it will scratch because we've made such a shiny surface here. So just a few drops on your pad like that, and then it's just a really thin coat over the surface, as you guys can see. So I'll go over the whole thing, just do the whole perimeter. Then I also like to hit the bevels. And that's it. That's literally how easy it is to use our ceramic coating. If you want to do more coats, give it 15 minutes. And if you just want to leave it to dry, give it 24 hours. So that's it for the ceramic, and you guys can get that on our website. All right, everyone. So this is what a $50,000 shoe looks like cast in resin. All in all, this thing turned out awesome. What we were the most concerned about was bubbles and overheating here, obviously, and there is not a single bubble, literally not one bubble in this whole thing. None of the ink bled out from the laces, which is something we had issues with on our previous test pieces, and Charlie said he approves of it too. So with all that in mind, this is a huge success. Huge shout out and thank you to our client for even just trusting us and allowing us to do this with such an expensive piece. It was a lot of fun. And I appreciate everyone who's watched to the end of the video. It means a lot to us as well. So thank you guys for watching. Let us know what you think of the shoe, and we'll see you next week.